Hi, and welcome to Cross Learning. How many questions did your child ask you today? What's the weather like? What is this? Who is that? Who's at the door? Why do I have to brush my teeth? Why do I have to go to bed? All sorts of questions your child probably asked you today or yesterday. And some of those things that you probably had to Google because you don't know the answers. You don't know the answers to everything. I don't either. Who does? But anyway, all of these questions are very important because what your child is doing is that they're making sense of the world. They're making sense of the environment. How do things work? How do things go together? What is this? So they're making sense of their environment, which is a really important thing as the child gets older. It expands their knowledge and also expands their capacity to think and to wonder and to imagine. All these skills that are very, very important. Take this bear, for example. What is it? It's a bear. It's not a real bear. It's a stuffed bear. What does it look like? What's the color? What's the size of it? What's the texture? What does it feel like? Is it light? Is it heavy? What you're doing is talking about putting things in categories, sorting things by its attributes, which is what kids do on a regular basis, but don't necessarily think about, which is why we as parents, as educators, as sisters, as brothers, as guardians, sort of do this in our regular lives, where we ask questions to children so that they can understand, so that they can think, so that they can know. Take this, for example. Put you away there. Our beetle, if you can see it. What is it? It's a beetle. It's a bug. It has 6 legs. So when you are looking at something like a beetle, a piece of nature, which is not alive anymore. I didn't kill it. It was dried up. But you're talking about how things work. What do they do? What's the function of a beetle in our world? There is a function. There's a function of all sorts of creatures and things in our environment. Maybe good, maybe bad, maybe ugly, maybe great. But it's important to ask questions and to talk about these particular things to children so that they understand and so that things actually make sense. So what you're doing is you're inquiring. You're looking at these wonderful questions. Who, what, when, where, what, how? What does it do? Why does it do it? Who does it? Where does it happen? How does it happen? How does it move? How does it work? Very important questions. So if you think about things like show and tell, and the reasons why you do show and tell. 1, it's for confidence. 2, presentation skills. And it's also for inquiry, so that children can sort of think about their favorite object and categorize it and talk about the things that they love about it and use adjectives, use verbs, use nouns, use all sorts of things to talk about an object, which is relatively simple, but it can become sort of more complex the more that you talk about it. Very important skill. So what we're looking at now is inquiry. And when we talk about inquiry, going from very general to specific is a very important thing to think about. Also, when your child gets older, you can actually use it yourself, writing a paper. So you're looking at things that are very general, and then you're talking about it in a more specific way. For example, bell. When you think of bell, what do you think of? What's your what picture do you form in your head of a bell? Do you form a picture that looks like this? Many people do. When you think of bell, you think of something that looks a little bit like this. What is a bell? What does a bell do? So you're asking questions. So if you were writing this up in a paper, or if you were talking to your child generally about bells, you may generally talk about things that make sound. My little birdie. You can hear that. It makes sound. It makes sound. Is it a bell? No, it's not a bell. But is it similar to a bell? Yes, they both make sounds. Depending on what type of bell it is, depending on the color, they may be the same color. You can sort of categorize them the same, and then you can also categorize them differently. Think things like Venn diagrams. My gourd. I can shake it. Makes a sound. I can take a bell. I can shake a bell. I can shake a gourd. Are they the same instrument, or are they the same thing? No, they're not. But you can categorize them similarly, and then you can also talk about them differently using our question words, our who, what, when, where, why. Not all of them, but some of them you can actually use talking to your 3, 4, 5-year-old about an instrument or about a bell or about a noisemaker. or anything that you can possibly think of. Bell. When I put up the word bell, did you think of this? Old school bell. Old school bell. Anyway, but it's a bell. It vibrates. You hit it. You don't shake it. You hit it, as opposed to a bell like this. They both have an inside that sort of goes back and forth against the sides. This is actually called a clapper. They both have one of those. So it is very similar to something like this. Our cowbell doesn't look like the bell in the picture. It does not look like a bell or the bell that was in the picture, but it functions the same. You shake it back and forth and it makes a loud sound compared to our low sounding bell. One you hit, the other one you shake, but they are both bells. So when you're talking about bells, when you're talking about bears, or if you're talking about scissors, no matter what you're talking about, you're asking questions, you're inquiring, you're teaching your child how to think, how to ask questions, how to inquire, how to grow. All of these skills which are very important in regular life, in your ordinary functioning throughout society, throughout life, throughout the environment. And it's also important as your child gets older, going to school, where you may be thinking about research. You may be thinking about how to do a particular presentation. Maybe you're designing something. Maybe you're doing science, you're building something. All sorts of things. You are, or your child, asking questions, trying to figure out how things work, how things move, how things go, how things function best, how things function at its worst. So all of these skills are really important things. So that's it about bells. So you can, once again, use this with all sorts of things. Doesn't necessarily have to be instruments. It can be any object in your house. So I encourage you to ask questions and to talk to your child about things that are really important to them. Ask your child to engage in something like a show and tell, because they may actually find it really interesting. And they may be able to sort of talk about it in different ways that you've never thought of. Maybe they're using adjectives that you've never heard your child ever use, but it's something that's really interesting and really cool and something that's actually really important to them. And for them to talk about it increases confidence, it sort of boosts their self-esteem, and it also encourages them to use those words, use their vocabulary, and also increases their confidence, which is excellent. So bye for now. I'll see you next time.